I went to seminary in my mid-20s, still convinced that I would never be in any ministry of any kind, much less ordained ministry. I could never imagine it for myself because I grew up in more conservative evangelical churches that only had men pastors and men elders and teachers, and I never ever really saw women in leadership in church throughout my whole childhood. And so it took a very long time, I would like post seminary even, for me to even begin to imagine the possibility of being in ministry and being ordained as a priest. It took me a really long time to develop that imagination, I would say. I was serving as a lay hospital chaplain for a number of years in New York City. And as a chaplain, I was constantly sort of called into situations where I was acting like a pastor or acting like a priest. And even though I had so many hangups in my head about, I couldn't possibly ever kind of be in ministry or be a pastor or be a priest, what kept happening is I would be called to the bedside of infants who were in critical condition and be asked to baptize them, or I would give a eulogy at a funeral. And it was in praying with people at the bedside. And it was kind of almost in spite of myself, like acting like a pastor or a priest. I realized that I felt so at home in myself in those moments. And that kind of called me into a more intentional process of discernment, which again took a number of years. But I realized that I was in fact called to, or I did in fact feel called to ordained ministry. It took kind of doing it to make me realize, oh yes, this actually feels like me in a deep and unexpected way. I think two ways about it. On the one hand, when I think of 50 years of women's ordination, I think, oh my gosh, I'm aware of just this. I feel like I'm standing on this mountain of kind of witnesses and trailblazers and of women who have just shown me and shown the church what women's priestly ministry can look like. And I feel so grateful and inspired. And I also look back and think, oh my gosh, 50 years, that's kind of nothing. Like in the history of the Episcopal Church, in the history of of course, like the church over millennia. And so I feel both this, gratitude and acknowledgement for how far we've come and how many folks I have to learn from on this journey and who have just come before and swung open the doors for so many of us coming behind. And also aware of, that this still feels in some ways like a new thing, having women priests in the church. And I feel the newness of it as well, historically speaking. I think my message would be that there's room for you in ordained ministry and in priestly ministry. I think one reason that it took me so long to even acknowledge that I felt a sense of call or be able to imagine that for myself is because I didn't see myself in the priests that were in front of me, or even, I didn't grow up Episcopalian, so even in the pastors or other ordained leaders that were in front of me, I couldn't see myself in them. And I think it took me a while to learn that actually there was room for me to be a priest as me, kind of in my own body and my own person. And I would just remind anyone who is maybe considering a call to ordained ministry that you can be fully yourself and fully a priest at the same time, that there's a lot of room.